Welcome back everyone to more NASCAR Heat 3 coverage here at Knee Pit Gaming. Today's setup video is all about Atlanta Motor Speedway. If you haven't had a chance, go ahead and check out the gameplay footage that I uploaded a little bit earlier today. I have a link down in the description below. We're going to be taking a look at all three of the top series, the trucks, XFINITY Series, and then finally the Monster Energy Cup cars. We're going to be taking a look at lap times as well as the setups themselves. I've swapped things up just a little bit for this particular video as far as the setups among the three series. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and kick things off with the discussion about the trucks. Lap times for the trucks anywhere from a 30.4 to a 30.6 and you'll be perfectly fine. The AI are not overly difficult at this track in any of the top three series. Plus you can run the car wide open in any of the top three series. So speed is not really the issue. What I'm going to show you are setups not really built for speed. You can get more speed out of them. What I've built these for is stability around the AI. The AI are very aggressive at this track, and if you're going to be racing around them, then it's going to be good to have a setup that can enter the corners very low on the bottom of 2 or 3 wide, which you saw in the gameplay footage that I uploaded earlier today. Those are the kind of things that I want to make sure that I have in a setup as opposed to just all-out speed. You can do that for qualifying if you want to try to set track records and so on. Let's move on and discuss the setup itself. The shock settings, 3 and 5 respectively on bump and rebound for all of the shocks. And again, for our purposes, the reason I did this is in combination with the front springs particularly. This is what helps us get through the bumps. The stiffer the setup that we use on both the front springs particularly as well as the shocks, we'll have to deal with the bumps a little bit more. They'll be a little bit tougher to ride over smoothly. So that's why I'm using a softer shock package here. Moving on to the weight settings, we want maximum left side weight, of course, since we're only turning to the left. Front side weight and wedge both at 53%. That is our stability. If you're looking to make the car a little bit faster, I'm going to show you something in the Cup car a little bit later on that is a little bit faster and maybe not quite as stable for you in traffic. But the 53% on both the front weight and wedge will certainly get us the stability we're looking for. Moving on to the spring settings. As I mentioned, the front springs particularly are chosen based on the bumps. If I have a track where it's very bumpy like it is here or California, some of these places that have very prominent bumps, Las Vegas as well, then I tend to use a little bit softer front springs. So here we've got 700 pounds on the left front, right front is 900 pounds. The split between those is to tighten the car up a little bit on entry. I tend to use the left front spring a lot to determine how easily I want the car to rotate and how quickly I want it to rotate on entry. If I need the car to rotate quite a bit more than what the other setup variables are giving me, then I'll increase the left front spring, sometimes even above the right front spring, just depending on the track. The rear springs, 400 and 500, only a 100-pound split here, and again, that's to keep everything under control and maintain that stability. You can certainly get by with more of a rear spring split, particularly at this track. Tire settings, 26, 27 pounds, somewhere in that range on the left sides. Right sides, you can see I'm using the maximum 50 pounds because that runs a little bit faster. Depending on the track, I can usually pick up anywhere from a tenth to 2 or 3 tenths of a second per lap by using the 50 pounds on both right side tires. However, if you want to use a more traditional pressure, you could go anywhere from 33, 34 pounds, maybe as low as 32 pounds. Somewhere in that range will get you in the neighborhood you need to be in, and you can see how that feels for you. Miscellaneous settings, no real surprises here. Maximum camber, because that's shown to be the fastest. Front sway bars at 1.15 inches. The bigger you make the front sway bar, meaning the thicker it becomes in diameter, that's going to make the car tighter, particularly on entry. So I tend to use a very small front bar That's not what they do in real life, but in this game, that seems to be what works the best. But if you're a little bit too free on entry, car is turning a little bit too much, then move the front sway bar up a click or two, and that will probably help you out quite a bit. Moving on to the track bar, 12.5 inches on both the left and the right hand side. No split between the left and the right, again, for stability purposes. If you want the car to be a little bit looser on exit, then you would want to increase that right side track bar number. If the car is too loose overall, then you'll want to decrease both the left and the right side on the track bar, and that will slow down the rotation of the car quite a bit. Brake bias at 74%. Don't really use the brake a whole lot here. As I mentioned, you can run all of the top 3 series wide open at this track, except in, of course, traffic with the AI, where you'll have to lift some or maybe drag the brake a little bit at corner entry. So anywhere between 72 and about 75 seems to work out really good for me. Grill tape is at 50%. That's fairly aggressive for this track, so you might play around a little bit with that number. Wheel lock is at 10 degrees. That's a good number for me based on how quickly I like the car to steer. If I want the steering to be quicker, then I increase this number up to 12, 15, and so on. Steering offset is at 0.1, and that is simply to offset the hard pull to the left from particularly the camber settings in the front of the car. Moving on to the gear settings, I generally don't touch 1st through 4th gears unless I notice something that I really don't like about the gearing. Most of the time, I simply go straight to the rear end ratio. Right now, I'm running at 3.25, but as always, there is quite a bit of changeability really that you can use on this. If you want to turn more RPMs, you'll simply increase that number from 325 to maybe 333 or so on. If you want to turn fewer RPMs, then you'll go down to like a 310 gear, maybe a 3.0. But you don't want to get it too low. You get out of the power band for the engine. But again, you've got plenty of adjustability there. And running more RPMs will generally have the car looser. Fewer RPMs will tighten the car up. That's going to do it for our discussion of the trucks. Now let's move to Xfinity. Here in the Xfinity cars, let's talk a little bit about lap times. Again, you're going to be plenty fast for the AI. However, the Xfinity cars are by far the most competitive among the 3 series at this particular track. That's why I chose to include the gameplay from the Xfinity series this time instead of the Cup or the trucks. Here, I generally qualify in somewhere around the top 10, 8th to 10th or so. Again, these setups are not built for maximum speed, and they're certainly not built to put you on the pole. I can run anywhere from a 29.5 to about a 29.7 without too terribly much issue. Maybe a little bit slower if you choose to tighten the car up some more and get that extra stability. But again, that should have you qualifying somewhere around the top 10. And then very quickly, you'll find yourself in the lead, just depending on how aggressive you want to be with the AI in trying to pass them. You'll notice that the setup itself is very similar to what I used in the trucks, and that's because for me, they drive very similar. The lap times are certainly quicker in the Xfinity cars, but they drive very similar. In fact, in a lot of cases, I find that the Xfinity cars are the easiest to drive of the 3. So the setups between trucks and Xfinity are generally going to be very close, if not the same from track to track for me. Shock settings are the same as what we saw earlier, same reasoning behind that. Let's take a look at a few of the differences here between the trucks and the Xfinity cars. The wedge is increased just a little bit. The Xfinity cars tend to be a little bit freer overall, so I increased the wedge just a little bit for that stability. Also, you can notice that I have increased the left front spring all the way up to 900 pounds, and that's because I really want the car to turn well on entry so I can get to the bottom and hug the bottom if I need to, particularly in traffic. Otherwise, everything is a lot more of the same. You notice the track bar is at 12.5 inches. If you feel that the car is getting a little bit too skittish with you, particularly on entry, and the back end wants to step out, then simply lowering that track bar a half inch to a full inch on both sides can really help out with that. Otherwise, gears exactly the same. Let's move on to the Cup cars. With the Cup cars, this is where I wanted to show you something a little bit different. This is a lot closer to what I used in NASCAR Heat 2 for a lot of the mile-and-a-half type of tracks. So let's go ahead and take a look at something a little bit different that you can use. You can certainly use the same or similar setup that we saw earlier with the trucks or the Xfinity cars here with the Cup cars. But again, I wanted to show you something a little bit different. This is going to have a little bit lighter feel, particularly on the force feedback. The more, if we move down, the more front weight or nose weight and wedge you use, that tends to give you a heavier, tighter feel, particularly in the force feedback wheel. So that's one of the reasons why I like it, because I like a lot of force feedback to tell me exactly what the car is doing. So here I'm using 51% front weight, 52% wedge. Front weight is used to control primarily the entry to the corner and how quickly the car rotates. Same thing with the wedge. It's overall about how quickly you want the car to rotate. If you want the car to rotate slower, you'll simply increase the wedge number. Moving on to the springs, a little bit different here. 750 pounds on the left front, the same right front at 900 pounds. I increased the left front spring a little bit from the 700 I used in the trucks, simply because I wanted the car to turn a little bit better, but getting much higher than this can get the car a little bit skittish on entry, and I wanted to stay away from that and keep both the front weight and the wedge at a lower number. So that's why I backed off just a little bit on the spring, particularly in comparison to the Xfinity cars. The rear spring's a little bit different, a little softer left rear spring, just to help the car to rotate a little bit. We have a little bit more split in the rear springs, which means that the car is going to rotate more, particularly on the throttle. So if the car gets too loose on you, particularly under throttle, then you'll want to decrease the amount of split you have in the rear springs, or simply decrease both rear springs overall if the rear of the car is doing too much of the work and getting a little bit too loose on you. Tire settings are the same, and miscellaneous settings is where you'll notice another key difference. But because we're using less front weight and less wedge than with our other setups, I need to lower the track bar in some cases quite a bit, depending on the track, based on the fact that now we don't have as much nose weight and wedge to stabilize the car, so I need to lower the track bar so that the car doesn't over-rotate. 8.5 inches seems to be a good setting for me here, but if you need the car to rotate a little bit better, then one of the options you have is to simply increase the track bar. Brake bias, again, somewhere between 72-75%, seems to work pretty good. The grill tape is fairly aggressive here at 40%. You might want to back off of that, but you should still be fine at 40%, but that is fairly aggressive. Wheel lock and steering offset are the same, and you notice that the gears are the same. So here I've given you a couple of different types of setups, a little different feel between the two of them. Both of them can be perfectly fine. It's more of a preference thing, and overall just how much you want to focus on speed versus stability along with that feel that you're looking for from the car. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Thanks for joining me, and stay tuned for more NASCAR Heat 3 coverage here at Knee Pit Gaming.